Ladies and gentlemen, the news is finally out. The Legend of Zelda is getting a live-action movie, and honestly, I couldn't be more excited. Well, it's certainly not going to be as colorful and slapstick as the Mario movie. Given its success, I think they'd be foolish not to take a few lessons from that one. Zelda can have herself some of those hashtag girl boss moments. Ganondorf can sit in his castle singing along with Zeldy, 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 Zeldy. But the real mystery is in a complicated timeline of heroes. Which Link is going to be your best choice for the movie? Which one is going to be the most iconic for the series? Which one instantly sells you on Spirit of the Hero? I know it's not necessarily live action ready, but personally I'd put my money on Wind Waker Link. He's cute, he's got an attitude, he wears a cool lobster shirt, not to mention that he's like the only one to defeat Ganondorf and... Wait, Tom, what? What do you mean that Link isn't really a Link? Hello Internet, welcome to Game Theory, the show that's risking its neck by diving headfirst into Zelda theories. The last time we covered the Zelda franchise was when Tears of the Kingdom was first announced, back when it was still known as Breath of the Wild 2, 4 years ago. Believe it or not, my friends, we first heard about this game back when the Avengers saga concluded, back when people tried to storm Area 51, back when live-action Sonic looked like this. Oh, it was a simpler time. But now the game is finally released, once again blowing all previous Zelda titles out of the water. The open world is huge, the missions are long, the crafting mechanics are hilarious. It literally makes Breath of the Wild look like a tech demo. But while everyone else is getting lost in its incredible world or arguing about whether it deserves the title of Game of the Year, I was looking back at the games that came before it. You see, the timeline of Zelda has always been a bit of a mess. There's a reason we've already done 2 theories about this thing. But if I was gonna have any luck solving this game's place in the timeline, I was gonna make sure that I had to fully understand everything that came before. But as it tends to when we're doing this sort of research, something jumped out at me. Something I'd never picked up on before. Something that would totally upend a major part of the franchise and the timeline. And may have even offered a solution to the Ganondorf problem once and for all. And it all comes down to the Link from The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. The Hero of the Wind. At least, that's the title he's been given over the years. But I know the truth. That title is nothing but a sham. That Link is no hero. In fact, that Link isn't even a Link at all. Which, ironically enough, may just be the solution that Hyrule has needed this entire time. It's pretty well established at this point that the Link that we play as in each game isn't the same Link. Ocarina of Time Link isn't the same as the Breath of the Wild Link, and A Link to the Past Link isn't the same as Twilight Princess's Link. They're all unique characters, all with their own separate titles, like the Hero of Time or the Hero of Legend. The same actually holds true for Zelda. In basically every new game, we're playing as a brand new version of each of these characters, all in an attempt to once again stop the evil Ganon. This was an incredibly liberating idea for Nintendo because it allowed them to have thousands of years pass between games, explore new characters, new relationships, new settings every game, rather than being stuck in one very specific point in time. However, the Zelda fanbase, they weren't just gonna settle for cool idea, bro. There had to be an actual lore-based reason for all of this to keep happening. So Nintendo decided to answer the fanbase's prayers with what became the first game in the Zelda timeline, Skyward Sword. Skyward Sword was an interesting game when it first came out. It had every single fan flailing wildly in their living rooms trying desperately to defeat even the simplest of enemies. But if you manage to get past all of that, you are told the origins of the myths that we've spent years hearing about in all the other installments. We saw the founding of Hyrule, and after defeating the final boss Demise with the Master Sword, he casts this curse. Quote, "Though this is not the end, my hate never perishes. It is born anew in a cycle with no end. I will rise again. Those like you, those who share the blood of the goddess and the spirit of the hero, they are eternally bound to this curse. An incarnation of my hatred shall ever follow your kind, dooming them to wander a blood-soaked sea of darkness for all time." Hey Demise, edgelord much? Someone get this guy to a hot topic. Anyway, this is why Ganon's able to return in each installment. Each time he's defeated by someone with the spirit of the hero, a version of Link, his desire for revenge forces him to return to hopefully destroy Link once and for all in the next game. Now, I'm sure you're wondering what any of this has to do with this little guy right here, arguably the cutest and sassiest Link that we've ever encountered. Well, the curse puts real emphasis on the whole spirit of the hero thing, a title that this franchise doesn't just throw around willy-nilly. There are rules and guidelines to being deemed the spirit of the hero, and if you take a look at the actions of Wind Waker's Link, you start to see that the pieces don't exactly line up. Link right here, by the definition of the franchise, he's not a hero. In A Link to the Past, one of your goals is to rescue the 7 maidens that are vanishing one by one. Once rescued, one of the maidens tells us this, quote, "If the evil one destroys the hero, nothing can save the world from his wicked reign. Only a a person of the Knights of Hyrule who protected the royalty of Hylia can become the hero. Notice here that it says that the hero has to be one of the Knights of Hyrule. And A Link to the Past's link actually shows that it goes a step further, not only being a direct Knight of Hyrule, but carrying the bloodline with his uncle, who also was a former knight. One of the other maidens even says this, quote again, "You are perhaps the last one to carry on the bloodline of the knights." That right there, it seems pretty cut and dry, especially when other games go out of their way to tell us that the Link that we play as is indeed a part of the bloodline. Breath of the Wild Link is Zelda's appointed knight. In the Hyrule Historia, it said that the hero of time was once a Hylian knight himself, or at least fell within the bloodline. But there's very little known about the hero of Wind's lineage. For us to understand as much as we can, we have to look closer at the timeline itself. We established that Skyward Sword is the origin of the timeline, but after the events of Ocarina of Time, it all splits into 3 distinct branches. One is where Link is defeated by Ganon, who's then sealed away by the 7 sages. One is the child timeline, Link's original timeline that he returns to after defeating Ganon, and then there's the adult timeline, the one that Link time traveled to during the game and sealed Ganon away. Wind Waker is the first installment of that adult timeline. Before the events of the game, Ganon escaped the Sacred Realm, and with the hero of time now having returned to the past, there's no one to stop him. The goddesses have no other choice but to intervene by flooding all of Hyrule and weakening Ganon's power. Many years pass, and we come to Wind Waker, where Hyrule and the Royal Knights have been mostly forgotten, buried under the ancient sea. Within the Hyrule Encyclopedia, we can see how the map from Ocarina of Time before the Great Flood correlates to the map in Wind Waker. Zora's domain became Dragon Roost Island, and the people of Castletown and Kakariko Village retreated to what's now Windfall Island. But what's interesting about this map is Outset Island, the hero of Wind's home. It's not even on Ocarina's map. The furthest point is Lake Hylia, which the encyclopedia says becomes Great Fish Isle. Outset Island is even further south than all of that. What this means is Link's family lived way outside of Castletown, where all the royal knights were stationed. When the Great Flood happened, people ran to the closest mountains they could. If Link had any relation to the royal knights, he would have been living on Windfall Island, not some random island far away from the center of Hyrule. Now, some of you might be thinking that I'm trying to apply too much logic to a video game, to which I say, yeah, duh. And if you're surprised by that, well, it means you're not subscribed. So make sure you just slap that subscribe button so you can see realistic logic applied to any video game. Also, if you slap that subscribe button, it explodes a little bit, so, you know, that's cool too. So based on geography, it's highly unlikely that this Link is related to the Knights of Hyrule, thereby disqualifying him as a hero. But what about his shield, I hear you saying? In Wind Waker, Link's grandma does have a shield in the house and claims, quote, "Hanging the family shield on the wall as decoration is another tradition that has been carried down from those days." And the shield has the Triforce crest on it, the crest of the royal family and the royal knights. So there you have it, case closed. Matt Pat overthought something again, theory debunked. Right? Wrong. I'm not convinced that this is actually their family shield. Hear me out. Across Outset Island, there's a very similar symbol on everyone's front door, an upside down Triforce with a circle in the middle. It's also on Grandma's blanket. This isn't the Hyrulean symbol. This is a symbol of the Outset tribe, much like how the Gerudo, the Gorons, and the Hylians have a crest. And if that seems like a bit of a stretch, well, you don't have to take my word for it. Just look at what the King of Red Lions has to say about this Link. When asked by the Water Spirit if this is the hero of time, he responds, quote, "He has no connection to the legendary one." And here's the thing, the King of Red Lions, he isn't just some random talking boat, he is actually the King of Hyrule. So for him to outright say that Link has no connection to the hero of time's bloodline, nor mentioning the Royal Knight bloodline, a group that he would absolutely know a lot about, it puts no doubt in my mind that the hero of Wind does not meet the requirements of a hero by the definition laid out by this franchise. But the most critical piece of evidence comes all the way back around to that demise curse that we spoke about at the start of the episode. In the final moments of the game, Link defeats Ganondorf, which looks pretty painful, but thanks to the curse of demise, he'll just shrug it off and return at a later date, right? Except Ganondorf doesn't. Looking at all the subsequent games in the adult timeline, Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, we never see Ganon re-emerge. This is the only timeline where that happens. In all the other timelines, Ganon comes back again and again and again in every installment. But in the adult timeline, no, never again. At first, I thought maybe Ganon can only revive after a new spirit of the hero is born, but that isn't true. A Link to the Past and Oracle of Ages and Seasons have themselves the same hero, and yet Ganon is resurrected in each of those. In Spirit Tracks, we play as the hero of trains. Yeah, that is a real hero that exists in this universe, but he's a new hero born after the Hero of Wind, and yet Ganon still doesn't come back. What this means is that the Hero of Winds defeating Ganon at the end of Wind Waker broke the demise curse. Ganon was never able to revive himself. But why? Why only this timeline? Well, because unlike any other time in the series, this time he wasn't defeated by the spirit of the hero. Instead, he was defeated by some random kid from a far-off land. Ganon ties his life specifically to the spirit of the hero in that curse, to repeat the same old song and dance forever. So when a small child from across the ocean showed up looking the part, he thought it would be the same thing again. But it wasn't. Whether he meant to or not, the Hero of Winds tricked everyone into thinking that he was the destined hero. At the end of the day, that was what was able to get the job done and break the cycle forever. Or at least that's how it should have been, except for when the timelines re-merged together thanks in part to Hyrule Warriors. This allows Ganon to come back across all the different timelines, which then leads to the collective events of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. But there is a silver lining to all this. Thanks to the deception of the Hero of Winds, we now know how to truly defeat Ganon and break the curse of demise. And it is not this guy. The people of Hyrule need to rely on someone other than the spirit of the hero. They need to stop leaving it to Destiny, because Destiny clearly ain't doing them any favors. I mean, that's the entire point of the curse. They need to train someone else to defeat Ganon, and not just end the current evil, but end it permanently. And if Nintendo ever did want to retire Ganon for a new villain, I think I know the perfect person to finish it off for good. Rather than just some random character, why not pick someone that we've seen countless iterations of? Someone who's normally just a damsel in distress. That's right, I believe that Zelda will be the one to finally put Ganon to rest. We saw it a bit in Tears of the Kingdom where she saved the day by becoming a dragon because, of course, that was the answer here, but Zelda being the final hero would be the icing on the cake for this series. It fits with the lore, where it's not the spirit of the hero trying to defeat Ganon, but someone else, someone connected to the ongoing story, but free from the curse. It's also super poetic. Rather than waiting for a hero to save her kingdom, she saves it herself, ending the curse that's continued to plague Hyrule for generations. It would be a legend that would be passed down from generation to generation, a legend of the descendant of the goddess, the legend of Zelda. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
Fiber-powered, fiber-reliable with local staff that gets you. Cogeco, your local connection.
Soar into Paramount Plus. Browse and stream blockbusters. Catch new originals and exclusive series.
You have to save yourself.
I'm doing this for our family.
And enjoy hit shows of every kind.
Okay.
Stream a mountain of entertainment with Paramount Plus.
Me out that they put so much effort into remastering this 3DS game when so many others would have been better picks, because at the end of the day, I'm not really into Miitopia. This was always a very simple RPG that
I've been yapping on about Scooby-Doo this year, I know. It's a lot of meddling. Wait, remember Sonic X? It was the early 2000s attempt at making a new Sonic cartoon, as the Blue Blur was essentially getting remarketed in a new way, as were most things at the start of the century. If you are familiar with the Spawncast, a gaming news and discussion podcast live here on YouTube, you know I like to make jokes and poke light fun at the Sonic video game franchise. But there was a point in time where I was heavily invested in the Sonic franchise, from the games to merchandise and to the anime. But in general, the one thing I have always and will always like about Sonic is the character of Sonic overall. While Sonic X may not have been the solution for the franchise in general to branch out, the series ended up running for quite some time, with 3 seasons totaling 78 episodes, featuring a mixed bag of what you're going to get from the series. It felt like 2 different shows were trying to come together at times that didn't always click. It wanted to be a Saturday morning cartoon with the fun and carefree nature that a Problem of the Week style show presents, that also wanted to tell these larger arc stories from situations that come from from the base plot of the anime to recreating what some of the games had to offer. So for today, let's take a look back on the Sonic X series and see what made it work and what made it not work, but also why it just might be a guilty pleasure show for fans of Sonic at the end of the day. Originally, Sonic X came out in Japan before it made its way here, where I first saw it on the Fox box. Yuji Naka, who at the time served as the head of Sonic Team, the name of the developers for the Sonic video games, would become the executive producer for the anime. His vision for Sonic X would be to help bring the popularity of Sonic to newer heights, believing that the anime, the merchandise, and the video games coming out could really put Sonic up there against the massive juggernaut that Pokemon had already become at the time. 2003 was dubbed Sonic Year internally for the full-on tactics used to build out the Sonic franchise, wanting the newer generation of gamers who are playing on the Game Boy Advance or current home consoles to be introduced to Sonic across the board. I guess the real question here is, was all of this branching out going to truly be worth it for the franchise? It's safe to say that on the gaming side of things, we had some of the most memorable entries into the Sonic franchise outside of the core original games that came before it. At the end of the 90s and the start of the 2000s, Sonic offered an onslaught of new Sonic games: Sonic Advance 1, 2, and 3, Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, Sonic Heroes, and more. There always was representation in gaming form for the series, and this new anime would serve in the aid of brand recognition among many other things. But in a roundabout way, the games would in turn influence the anime, from the attitude of the characters involved aligning to the storylines being used in the show. So let's really break that down, as Sonic X can really be split between the 3 seasons the show had into these multiple different arcs. So let's explore them.
Sonic X will be back in a flash!
I've been pulled through time. If what I saw is true, there's nothing to stand between this world and utter destruction.
Only one way to find out. It's up to us to save this place.
Is this crack? Give it. Come on, you're the god of mischief.
Always have been, always will be.
YouTube Premium is ad-free YouTube and the YouTube Music app all together. Uninterrupted videos and an app made just for music. YouTube Premium. 1 subscription, 2 apps. Try 1 month free of charge.
You're watching Sonic X.
Season 1 of the show focuses on just what in the heck is going on, with Sonic and the extended Sonic cast of characters being thrust from their world and into an adjacent one that represents Earth essentially, making the base format of the show an isekai, having a fish out of water or hedgehog out of a parallel universe story. Starting off the series with Sonic in his world going after Dr. Eggman, who has the Chaos Emeralds and has captured the character Cream. Sonic and friends attempt to save Cream and stop Dr. Eggman, but the plans go haywire with the Chaos Emeralds unleashing the power of Chaos Control, causing an all-powerful dome of light to consume the area, resulting in everyone now ending up in our world. Well, a version of our world filled with some fictional places, like Central City, California, where Sonic immediately finds himself on the run from the local authorities before running into the human character of Chris. Chris is a rich kid who lives in a very nice estate, as Sonic and friends quickly become friends with Chris, who ends up at first hiding them to keep them from being discovered, especially by his parents, but this doesn't last too long until their cover is blown and they become accepted and welcomed, as they also end up having to deal with Dr. Eggman and all of his evil plans. The main struggle here between our heroes and the bad guys is over the Chaos Emeralds still, as they have made their way to Earth as well, and the fight to collect them first is on. All of this information ends up on the president's desk, and soon after, Sonic works alongside the military to fully put an end to Dr. Eggman's plans of world domination. Is this a not so well hidden piece of propaganda to join the military? Nah, not quite. It's all portrayed really silly. Once we get through the starting arc that fully introduces us to the way things are for Sonic and friends now on Earth, they still have much left to deal with if they want to have a chance at getting home. The Chaos Emeralds are the key, and we see more continuing fights between Sonic and Dr. Eggman throughout this season as they are able to collect the emeralds together, leading to some internal conflict later on with a character like Knuckles, and how he sees coming up with a solution to try and get the last emerald from Dr. Eggman, foolishly trusting him at one point in the pursuit of doing so, resulting in Dr. Eggman now having all the emeralds and becoming the more powerful version of himself to now finally finally defeat Sonic. Through this, Chris is able to come to the rescue and help Sonic get his hands back on the emeralds, and then go supersonic to defeat Dr. Eggman once more. But really, this moment allowed Chris to play a larger role in helping out the Sonic crew and give him a better reason to be included onto the show. If you're going to add a character like this to the show, it's better to give him some sort of real reason to be there, regardless if it can feel more like a random thing sometimes. The show could easily work without a human addition to the team, where Sonic has to deal with these situations on his own or with his friends, but if you're tossing in a human element anyway for the reasons of relating to the show better for the viewers, or to be like some other shows on the air, then at least having him do, well, anything I guess is good to see. And this is something that will progress more throughout the series, since the human element of the show isn't really going anywhere. After this whole bit of getting the emeralds back and defeating Dr. Eggman again, Sonic and friends attempt to return home with the Chaos Control power, but it doesn't work in doing just that. Instead, it brings to Earth parts of their world and more mysteries to figure out in the next season. Season 1 really is just this mixed match series that does deal with the Chaos Emeralds and Dr. Eggman, but it quickly turns further into the Saturday morning cartoon that it is, featuring a wide array of episodes that are nonsensical, random, and honestly chaotic sometimes due to their plot structures. But I think that's why it oddly works here and there. I wouldn't call it great, but the ridiculousness and absurdity of it all do make for some fun one-off episodes. But don't get me wrong, there are plenty of episodes that are just not great. Chris often feels like a throwaway character to give us this human vessel, and for the most part he is, but sometimes we do get a little bit more character for him. A character that does have his own life going on outside of being there for Sonic and whatever else is happening. He has his own group of friends that get some screen time, Danny, Francis, and Helen, and they do aid in adding more depth to Chris's character overall, but among this character of friends, one of them gets more of a focus to stand out, and that's Helen, a character bound to a wheelchair who doesn't let that define her. She has wants and dreams, and even Sonic ends up helping her achieve one of them in a very heartwarming episode, allowing us to see how Sonic bonds with the other human characters as well. It's a great moment of character building and world building that we don't get to see a lot throughout the series, especially with what can be deemed as a side character. That being said, the human characters in the show end up being the least interesting part of the series, but that's understandable when the show should be more focused on Sonic and his allies from their homeworld. Sadly, Knuckles, Cream, Amy, Tails, they all feel like they're playing second fiddle when it comes to more screen time for characters like the President or Chris's family. And while those other characters do get some nice moments that make for some good laughs or to drive the plot to be way more crazy than it needed to be, there should have been at least a bit more focus on Sonic's pals, as all that left a lot to be desired, especially in the first season. And this one feels hit or miss with a lot of Sonic fans, or when just speaking about those who watch the show in general. There are bright spots in season 1, but there are a lot of downsides to it as well. But what about where it goes from here? Sonic 2 is where the video game influence comes into play thanks to the adventure games, where the first bit of the season follows the plot of Sonic Adventure 1, but in a much more condensed way. This brings in Dr. Eggman's return, as he ends up finding out about Chaos, this embodiment of power and destruction that feeds on the power of the Chaos Emeralds. To set this power free, Dr. Eggman blasts apart the Master Emerald that held Chaos at bay, scattering the pieces of the Master Emerald, giving Knuckles a side mission to find those pieces, while he also learns a bit about his past. Chaos, though, much like the actual word, is a character that can't really be controlled, going on its own to collect the emeralds and become the most powerful version of Chaos it can become, destroying a whole city, surprisingly harming 0 people by doing so, but it's a cartoon and a 4Kids dub, so what did you expect? Thanks to Sonic having a really fun battle as Super Sonic against Chaos to defeat him, and the help from a character named Tikal, who originally contained Chaos in the Master Emerald along with her own spirit a long time ago, and was now released when Chaos was, they are able to once again contain Chaos within the Master Emerald, along with Tikal's spirit once more. As quickly as that was ran through, we right away jump into the story elements of Sonic Adventure 2, where Shadow the Hedgehog is introduced into the series thanks to Dr. Eggman, and now Shadow's evil doings are being mistaken for Sonic doing them because they see these 2 completely different hedgehogs and think, oh yeah, that's the same person. Haunted by these visions of a woman named Maria whose life was lost due to humans, Shadow is blinded by revenge on the human race, helping Dr. Eggman activate the Eclipse Cannon, a weapon with the power to blow up Earth, but instead is used here by the powers of the Emeralds to blow up half of the moon in a show of force. And things only get worse for Sonic and friends here when they try to go and confront Dr. Eggman. But with all of the Emeralds in the same vicinity now, at this space colony arc, it automates another program unbeknownst to Dr. Eggman set to collide the Ark with Earth itself. Now, Dr. Eggman's threats of world domination would be no more if there is no more world to dominate, so good guys and bad have to work together. Chris comes in clutch once again, having time with Shadow to help him fully remember his past and what happened, seeing that Maria in the end never wanted him to seek out this revenge, and plans to now help out the others in stopping Doomsday from happening. In the pursuit of trying to stop this, a giant lizard creature stands in their way, with Sonic and Shadow entering into their super modes to go off and defeat it, as well as finding the solution to stop the Ark from colliding with Earth that would end up taking the life of Shadow. This was easily the best told part of the season and really gave Shadow a thoughtful retelling of his backstory with Maria before he went all Shadow the Hedgehog video game on the world. The problems with Season 2 really boil down to rushing certain story elements of the games. Now, it's not all bad, it's a nice way to adapt certain aspects and create a more clear narrative structure that would work better in this medium. It's just that certain moments from the game itself that do get touched on and get a less than great emphasis put on them, making their impact less interesting or meaningful compared to the games themselves, put a damper on telling them in the first place. Specifically E-102 Gamma's arc, which tells us the story of a robot that discovers compassion through a bird named Lily, disturbing imagery of robots being torn apart and the animals trapped inside these machines being painfully rebuilt, as well as Amy's kindness in helping Gamma see that they are good, ending on Gamma rebelling against Dr. Eggman and all that he has done to the machines like him, making the ultimate sacrifice in the end, giving up its robot life to set free the birds inside the other robots and its own. If that sounds like a rushed explanation of it all, along with the whole birds inside the robots thing, that's because it's rushed here compared to the game's telling of Gamma. But on that same breath, the detail and amount of time that the season spends on Shadow feels much richer, not being afraid to dig into the complexities that come with the character and his past with Maria, causing him to initially be this powerful villain-like character, but have this realization that turns him to sacrificing his life and becoming a hero. It's filled with great character depth and detailed emotions that translate extremely well from the video game version of the story itself. So I guess this balance here is really wishing that the show's take on Sonic Adventure 1 was as thorough as the show's take on Sonic Adventure 2 when it came to the characters themselves. But that's not even where Season 2 of the show ends, as they begin to adapt other elements from other Sonic games and bring the series back to more of what the first season offered.
Sonic X will be back in a flash. Little Caesar's Crazy Puffs are just $4.99. Order.
This is a Modern Warfare 3 promo takeover. Get dual double XP and bonus in-game rewards.
Modern Warfare 3 in-game rewards when you order from Little Caesars?
And Crazy Puffs for $4.99.
You got a deal.
Delivery.
You're watching Sonic X.
Continuing from the moon itself now being destroyed, Dr. Eggman began repairing it to make up for all the evil that he has done thus far, and even comes up with a solution when this new version of the moon created keeps the moon in front of the sun, with the solution being these sunshine balls that produce artificial sunlight. The public is happy, but Sonic thinks something is fishy, as he discovers that the sunshine balls are really a way to brainwash people into his worshipping, as the people now become mad at Sonic for stopping this until he reveals what Dr. Eggman was really doing, sending him to jail after this was exposed. This also brings in more characters like the Chaotix crew to the series. The next bit of story the show takes inspirations from is the Game Boy Advance game Sonic Battle, as we get introduced to a robot named ML, as Cream and her Chow Cheese end up helping this little bot out. And then this brings us to a tournament arc that many anime have. After Dr. Eggman escapes from jail, the tournament itself is in the hopes of winning the Red Chaos Emerald, as every character, human, robot, or animal I guess, is allowed to enter and duke it out to become the winner, which emerald ends up being the powerful little robot who could, but since he originates from being one of Dr. Eggman's robots, the power of the emerald reverts his programming to being a Dr. Eggman loyalist, causing him to start attacking the city with the others trying to stop him, ending with the closest friends he has made, Cream and Cheese, having to be the ones to defeat him for good after he couldn't be reasoned with to stop what he is doing. After this, we get the wrap-up part of the season where we get to see some more battles with Dr. Eggman, and then we get into the holy crap, what in the space-time continuum is happening moment, where both Sonic's homeworld planet and Earth are coming together somehow, with the result of them doing so leading to devastating consequences that would freeze both of the planets. To stop this, Sonic and his friends need to return home, and they successfully come up with a way to do so. But not for Sonic, who is left on Earth with Chris after Chris's struggles of being alone get fully realized here between the two characters. As they go off on a much more somber journey together, Chris tries to work through his feelings of being lonely before Sonic came around, and feels like he will feel the same after he leaves. I guess guess that his friend group, his family, butler, maid, all of them aren't there for him or something, but despite that, this is how he overall feels. In a more touching moment in the series, Sonic says that he will always be there for him as the two of them cry while Sonic ends up leaving Chris. We now finish things off on Sonic's home planet where Dr. Eggman is still up to his evil ways, but in the nick of time, Sonic comes back to stand up to him along with all of his allies to defeat him once again, as we get a teaser look into the future where Chris, now older, is working on a project that would allow him to make his way to Sonic's world, giving us some more time with Chris and his friends more grown up as Chris looks back on his time with Sonic, ending the season. Chris's story overall doesn't add much to anything. His arc in the series doesn't feel as emotionally impactful as they seem to display it in his final moments with Sonic this season. I feel the problems with Sonic 2 really stem from the back half, where the show follows the mold of the first season with smaller arcs, but allows for more playful moments of the IP. It splits its focus from a more clear-cut narrative with the Adventure 1 and 2 storylines to a less focused timeline of events that follow. I will say, compared to Season 1, Season 2 has way more highs than lows, especially with the way they handled the Adventure 2 storyline, and honestly, I am fine with the back half stuff as well, but together, it feels like two different shows. And with how big of a cast of characters there are by the end of the season, it rarely felt that any of them got their time to shine moment, or felt like they earned any emotional payoffs like with Chris's story. But that all felt like an ending, right? We know we have another season to cover, but Season 2 wrapped up the overall conclusion. So then what happened? Well, the show was popular, but just not as popular in the Japanese market, but for markets like North America, Europe, and the Middle East, there was a higher demand to keep the show going, making Season 3 pretty much exclusive outside of Japan until 2022, when it would be finally aired on TV there. So yes, Sonic 3 came from more being wanted, and with that demand, those markets sure got more of the Sonic X that they needed, regardless if Season 2 has what seems like a pretty significant finite ending. But forget all that you know about what has come before, as this season gets a bit wild, and potentially produces a season that you may find constantly better as a whole than the previous two. Sonic is dealing with a threat called Dark Oak while he is in supersonic form, but to stop this altercation from getting worse, with the power that this being has, Sonic sends out the Chaos Emeralds all around the galaxy, and gets away from the battle in general. A new character named Cosmo ends up crashing onto Sonic's planet, as she was in search of the one who can harness the power of the emeralds, as Dark Oak and his army called the Metarex steal the planet egg from Sonic's planet, causing the planet to begin dying with the new goal of re-finding the emeralds to defeat this new enemy. I mean, I get why Sonic tossed out the emeralds like that, but needing them right away again just seems like a cop-out way to have them be searched for once more. Revisiting 18-year-old Chris, who finally figures out how to get to Sonic's world, he enters through the portal to see that he has become his 12-year-old self again, with the time difference on how Sonic's planet works versus Earth, which caused only 6 months to go by for Sonic while it's been 6 years for Chris. I'm just gonna let it be. Through this season, we get to learn a lot of the backstory of Cosmo and who she really is, and she ends up building a nice relationship with Tails, but not so much with Shadow, who makes a surprising return, with his memory once again kinda wiped thanks to Dr. Eggman. And Dr. Eggman is back as well and has several run-ins with the Sonic crew, but Rouge and Shadow find their own reasons to investigate the whole Metarex situation and try and stop it. But Shadow comes after Cosmo, as she is from the same species as the Metarex and has been a spy for them, but this was forcefully done with her not knowing, and Shadow didn't know that fact yet. Once this does become a fact that he knows, the whole group head to deal with the Metarex army and Dark Oak, and they end up defeating them. But as a parting gift, they target destroying the whole galaxy with a planet that has become a giant seed, and the Metarex turn into a giant beast, latching onto the seed itself and get in their super forms again. But the sacrifice here to truly save the galaxy is that Cosmo gets a vision that she must become one with the seed and sacrifice herself, with the power of having Tails, the character that cares about her the most, shoot in Super Sonic and Super Shadow at the fused version of the seed and herself, taking out the threat of Dark Oak and his army, saving the galaxy, but in turn killing Cosmo. The power of the seed now scatters, with the planet eggs that were stolen all heading back to give new life to the dying planets. But the power of the blast needed to be contained, leaving Shadow to be heroic once more and then dies again. Shadow dies twice in this anime. But in the end, Sonic can hear Cosmo through the universe as he sits in reassurance that the galaxy was saved and Cosmo is technically out there in spirit. Dr. Eggman ends up in aiding getting Chris back home, but it was in the efforts of nerfing Sonic and his friends just a bit for his future evil plans, leading to the same old back and forth Sonic has to do with Dr. Eggman. Chris this season ends up adding a lot more in value to everything happening, piloting their starcraft, having characteristics that define him, not end up being a lonely side character, and I think that changing his character for the better boils down to him being older now, just back in his younger body. His new mindset and personality from just growing up up stayed with him. For the initial version of Season 3 that we received here in the US, Shadow is dead, but in the official Japanese version, he is shown on another planet, so he doesn't die once or twice in this anime. I think this season overall is a lot more solid and focused for the main story being told, but still finding time to have less serious moments, bringing some lighter tones that we've seen in parts from the previous seasons. The main difference here, fixing the focus from being on all these random human characters and bringing the attention to the core cast of Sonic characters, letting them grow and explore who they are way more than before, which felt like a problem the first 2 seasons really struggled with. Sonic gets a deeper arc for himself, struggling with the power and force that he has, leading to him snapping at one point, unleashing a level of power that makes his spunky attitude disappear and all he sees is the red from the blood of his enemies. Okay, it's not that aggressive with it, but it was still a cool moment. While I said the Japanese version of Season 3 didn't air until 2022, technically the Japanese voice acting was done at the time before the show didn't end up officially airing there, leading to the Japanese audio for those episodes being leaked online around that time. As a series itself, it's okay. There's a lot of good that can be found in each season, but almost an equal amount of bad from the first 2 seasons and some bits of the 3rd season. The show struggled to find what it wanted to be, towing the line of being a direct video game retelling and something wholly original, resulting in a pretty series at the end of the day. But despite this and the more corny writing thanks to 4Kids localizing it, the show still offers a level of charm that makes this a fun watch that you can still poke some fun at while you enjoy it. Whether you think it's bad or think it's good, there's something for every Sonic fan to love here and every fan to come together and laugh at. The fandom for Sonic is massive, and Sonic X is only a small part of the large franchise that Sonic is. There are other Sonic shows out there that have come before and after it, yet Sonic X stayed in the conversation all these years later, and that's because it's memorable. The look of the show, the characters within it, and the storylines all have their degree of nostalgia now attached to the series for those who grew up with it originally. But even today, for people checking it out for the first time, it represents a moment in the history of Sonic where it can be appreciated for what it did to bring in new fans to the series, and try new things both inside and outside of the anime, as well as give us some really great memes to share and laugh about. Anytime we talk about any property that 4Kids acquires a license for, there is to be expected a lot of changes and censorship made compared to the original series. There is to be expected a lot of changes and censorship made compared to the original release of the series that came out in Japan. That's no different here, as Sonic X had its own fair share of changes made. In fact, it's a long list of small things here and there within nearly each episode of the series. Whether the violence was too over the top or some innuendos getting too out of hand, 4Kids had their hands all over the series. While not as harsh as other shows under the 4Kids knife, some of the cuts made are a mixed bag of at least understandable and utterly ridiculous. The legacy of Sonic X lives within the time where so many properties were trying to find their own slice of the early 2000s franchise craze. Everything needed to have video games, TV shows, trading cards, comics, and toys, and the Sonic brand was no stranger to trying to do this. We saw how the anime tied itself to the current line of video games coming out while trying to create its own reasons for the viewer to be attached to it. Sonic X, under that name specifically, did branch out into a trading card game and a comic book series, as well as having toys, both regular action figures and McDonald's toys. While the mainline video games kept being what they were, Sonic X did have a Leapster educational game made, so there's that. And while I may still make jokes at the expense of the Sonic video game side of things, I mean no malice with my words towards it. It's all in good fun, and I support those who love the video games, who love all the different series of shows Sonic has, and all those who just want to collect merchandise related to the Blue Blur. I have my fair share of games in the franchise that I like. I enjoy a lot of parts of this show, and I have a bunch of Sonic collectibles that I own. So I might overall just be an actual fan of Sonic and not just the character himself. Who knows? The Sonic X anime may not be perfect and does a lot different than most people would have wanted, but I still had fun with it back when it came out, and there was a level of nostalgia for the time in which it did originally air on the Fox box. But let me know your thoughts on Sonic X in the comments below. I'm sure you have plenty to say. I've been Jordan Fringe. Thanks so much for watching. Like and subscribe. Later.
Easy to navigate and easy on the eyes? Easy. Turn to talented freelancer.
Wait, remember Shaman King? No, not the newer version of the series, I'm talking about the OG early 2000s series today. And the early 2000s were truly my realization of the awesome forms of media coming from Japan and brought to the US. From manga to anime, my worldview was expanding thanks to it all, and Shaman King serves as one of the earlier series that I was totally hooked on. It just had this look and style to it that felt so fierce yet relaxed at the same time. A story that is equal parts kick-butt action as it is lighthearted and extremely charming. The property of Shaman King is popular, like really popular, being a highly regarded manga first and foremost, with a fair amount of both love and hate for the original anime that ran into some snags when trying to adapt the franchise. So I want to get into all of that and mainly talk about the original anime adaptation that I experienced, what happened to it when dealing with the manga still being written at the same time, what 4Kids would do with their license of the property, and what the future holds for this beloved series. If you are from the US like me, most anime you consumed at first were through one of two ways, and I mean this to my generation specifically, seeing stuff like Dragon Ball Z through Toonami, or having 4Kids introduce you to many properties that you may have come to love, only to realize that the versions of the anime you witnessed were the chopped and screwed versions some odd years later. But even in knowing that, still have a level of nostalgia held for the corniness of the dubs, thanks to them being the introduction to the properties for you in the first place. Now, let's explore some Shaman King, shall we? When it comes to Shaman King in general, my first introduction to the property was through the monthly Shonen Jump magazine, where I was so fascinated with what I had seen that I had to go out and start reading the series standalone by getting the first volume of the manga. And to my surprise, Shaman King had more beyond the pages of the manga, and had the anime licensed by 4Kids and brought over to be on the Fox box in September of 2003, right there alongside the mix of shows the Cartoon Block was offering. This is how I experienced the anime first. While it is the 4Kids dub of the show, it's technically the version that is extremely nostalgic to me. The main character we follow in the series is a kid named Yo, allowing him to harness the power of a dead person's spirit and then use that power to fight and battle others. The spirit that he has that translates to the smaller ball-like version and full embodiment is Amidamaru, a long-dead legendary samurai who ends up deciding to work with Yo, as the two form a close bond as we begin to learn about the purpose of the shaman. It ends up being your standard fare of loose explanations of what's going on for a bit, but the baseline premise comes from when Yo ends up having to battle a character named Len, that the all-out battle to be the Shaman King is upon us, and what this ends up being is a tournament that takes place every 500 years, featuring shaman from all around to duke it out for the title of Shaman King. Once crowned Shaman King, they are the sole person who can harness the control over the Great Spirit, being able to mold the world as it stands in whatever way they want. A pretty all-powerful prize for the victor, and a very solid way to bring in all these different types of characters that all have their own reasoning for wanting to become the Shaman King. Now, the legacy of Shaman King is pretty interesting, as this anime adaptation of the manga would start happening before the manga itself was finished, leading to a pretty quick catch up to where the manga was at and having to do what Game of Thrones eventually would do, and that's make the rest of it up without having the source material to follow, making this first version of the anime one that goes a bit in a different direction than how the manga would wrap things up. So let's dig into what the first version of the Shaman King anime had to offer.
This ain't nothing but a little movement therapy. Why me as my shoulders moving voluntarily? Step left, but his hip go right. When he get it, I get it, they get hit from sides like that.
Elevate how you hydrate and keep it smart with Smart Water Alkaline.
I chose Wix for my business because of its massive scope for functionality and freedom of creation. Being able to integrate and change and develop at my own pace.
The original manga was created by Hiroyuki Takai and began its run towards the end of the 1990s, with the first chapter starting in Japan's Weekly Shonen Jump in June of 1998, fully running until August of 2004 to complete its story with 32 individual volumes released. Since then, the Shaman King brand would only grow, with this year serving as the 25th anniversary of the series, as fans can look back and celebrate just how expansive it all became. Today, nearly 40 million copies of the manga series in Japan have been sold or are in stores, ranking it up there as one of the best-selling manga in general, all starting from the small beginning that brought an interesting concept to the pages of a comic that eventually turned into a full-on anime series due to its rising popularity only 3 years into its creation. The series wasn't done yet, only being around halfway done when the anime was being created. Now, this isn't something new. We can look at almost any popular manga property, and there is probably an anime series going on at the same time already. But more traditionally, when this happens, we'd see several avenues taken in these situations to keep both running when the anime would catch up to where the manga is at. In some cases, we just have long gaps so that the manga can move forward along, and eventually there will be more proper source material to pull from. In other cases, and for sure the most prevalent for the really popular series, filler. Everyone's favorite word to discuss when there would be episodes that are solely created to fill in the gaps of the story, with most times random or less serious segues, as to not mess with the main story, being less consequential with whatever happens there. For Shaman King, however, the anime ran into a different problem, as it would come out in July of 2001 and end its run by September of 2002, producing a total of 64 episodes. Can you see the problem? The anime wrapped up its story a couple years before the story was finished. Because of this, the anime only followed the manga up until a specific point before they had to pivot and create their own plot points and eventual ending. So really, towards the end of the anime, it's all filler, but just not traditional filler. This I'll talk about more later on, but with the anime series done and the manga still running, what do we do with this now finished anime? Simple. It's time to bring it to international markets. With the manga, Viz Media was already on top of bringing the series to North America by having chapters serialized in the new English monthly Shonen Jump, and eventually manga volumes to follow. The anime would also be licensed at the same time to 4Kids, being localized for release on the Fox box later the same year. Now let's get the obvious out of the way. The 4Kids localization of anything they get a license for is always going to come with a slew of changes thanks to censorship. Now, compared to other shows, Shaman King didn't face the worst of it, but the biggest things were violence getting toned down and removing anything that would tie into religion, like crosses seen on gravestones would be removed. Suggestive or inappropriate for US audience bits were snipped and altered as well. So in the grand scheme of what 4Kids has done before, this isn't so bad, but the main thing you will notice, however, is the dub itself delivering that oh so nostalgically cringy writing which 4Kids was known for when they were replacing dialogue said by the characters. Oh, and some names were changed as well, so if you hear me mention a character's name that isn't what they are named originally, blame 4Kids. But this is the version I grew up with. I have this attachment to it for some reason, don't judge me. But let me tell you, Shaman King starts off so much fun. Yo merges with Amidamaru at the beginning of the series when Yo ends up fighting Ryu in the cemetery to protect his new buddy Morty, but Yo doesn't just get Amidamaru as his partner spirit after this moment. In fact, Amidamaru declines becoming Yo's partner, but Yo is determined on them coming together. Despite Morty pushing Yo away from this, Yo truly sees no evil in this spirit, leading him to eventually find this ancient sword when visiting a museum. As they then come across another spirit, Masoke, who was weeping, explaining his backstory to them about creating that sword and how he was great friends with Amidamaru in their original lives 600 years ago. But their bond comes from Amidamaru sparing his friend's life when ordered to kill Masake, so no other special swords like the one he had crafted could be made, causing him to take the sword with him and return one day and give it to Amidamaru as the best sword it can be. But this was overheard, and Amidamaru was attacked for disobeying his orders in favor of sparing his friend's life, as now he would have to fight off attacks as much as he could, but eventually, without his perfectly crafted sword, he would not live long past this, causing Masoke to be left with a sense of guilt and spend his afterlife crying over both his slain friend and what his perfectly crafted sword had now become, rusting away in a museum, never being able to fulfill his promise. Yo then works with Masoke to restore the sword to its full greatness in exchange for helping him fulfill his promise to his friend. In doing so, he leaves this plane of existence. Amidamaru is then gifted the sword by Yo, but still doesn't join him quite yet, with him ready to leave this world as well, until Yo has another encounter with Ryu again and decides to join in once more in helping him, there solidifying his decision to work with Yo, and the sword is then returned, now in its full glory, back to the museum, and our journey following Yo and Amidamaru begins. One thing I love about Shaman King is the wide variety of cool characters, and by that I particularly mean the manga, as the show has its fair bit of issues with characters later on, as they introduce more of them. Yo is obviously pretty cool. He just has this laxed vibe about him, but that doesn't overshadow the moments where he shows great excitement or is more expressive in certain situations. He's got some cool headphones and he doesn't like wearing an undershirt, so he's easy to root for during his battles. His new buddy Morty is your average everyday school student who ends up being able to see spirits, but is not trained in the shaman ways, and basically by accident becomes part of the story as our way to get introduced to Yo, and see firsthand what is going on. He's smaller than the others his age and he easily gets picked on for it, but his friendship with Yo is pretty great as it develops, and Morty's more scared and over-the-top reactions to seeing and being around these dead spirits starts to calm, and he learns to find the confidence in himself through this friendship. He also eventually becomes a shaman as well, because of course. Another main character quickly joins the cast, and that's Anna, who right away introduces herself as Yo's wife, and we see just how frightened Yo is of her as she is there to train him hard to be ready for future shaman fights, with the tournament coming up. She's a pretty interesting and headstrong character that deeply cares for Yo, wanting to be with him since he was the first friend she had ever made, and wants to help make Yo the Shaman King, which will in turn make her the Shaman Queen. Her way of showing love is definitely more aggressive than anything, but she truly does care for and believe in Yo. Maybe a little too overprotective, but as a character in general, I think she's great. From there, we constantly get to meet some incredibly cool and varied characters who all bring new personalities into the mix, thanks to where they're from and what they can do as different shaman, all having their own reasonings for doing what they do or wanting to become Shaman King, giving each of them a sense of purpose to be here in the story, again, earlier on, as opposed to the stuff that happens towards the end. And yes, Len's older sister did have me feeling a type of way growing up, but that's none of your business. And just to name a couple of my favorites here, a character that defined what being rad is was Trey, the snowboarder who has a big ol' heart of gold but can be pretty serious and tough when the challenge arises. I also really dig Ryu's story arc within the show, and he's not just the typical punk that we meet at the start of the series, but rather a person who finally lets out his emotions to show that he truly does care about something more in this world than just his ridiculous pompadour. But it is fabulous. And that's really only scratching the surface here with the characters in the show, as this quickly goes from a small group of people to a large roster of different and unique shaman. The anime towards the later parts, since it was mostly put together with no source material ready yet, sparingly gives us much more on other cool characters, making them feel a lot more background-like compared to the more fleshed out versions of them in the manga, offering a rush to the finish-like feeling, being an easy way to describe it. The main villain of the show, the ultimate shaman for Yo to face, is his brother Zeke, as they try and hide that fact for a bit in the series, even though they look pretty much alike, and also he's kind of like his ancestor. It's a whole weird thing. He's died a couple times, he's been reincarnated, he gets more powerful each time, and now he looks like Yo. And Zeke is shown as this unrelenting, immortal, powerful force, claiming Yo to be the other piece of his puzzle, as at one point the tournament doesn't matter anymore, with Zeke trying to reach the Great Spirit and Yo trying to stop him from doing so. Obviously, going up against this type of power with no plan results in Yo having no real way to combat his powers. So Zeke then just rips the soul out of Yo and consumes it, beginning to combine their souls together, explaining the whole other piece of the puzzle thing, as Yo loses everything that makes him him, losing his memories while he drifts away in this void. But when all the other shaman confront Zeke and try and stop him, they cry out that thanks to Yo, they are all stronger. He's not gone forever because Yo is always there in their hearts, as they all get ready for their last stand to stop Zeke, which, it's not going so well for them. But you know how this all goes, the big speech, the inspirational vibes, it all ends up helping Yo somehow break through the power of Zeke to get back to his normal self, as Zeke then just says screw it and goes right for the Great Spirit regardless. And now what are our heroes to do? He's becoming a literal god. Well, thanks to the energy from the others, Yo is able to reach a different level of power with Amidamaru, as they become one giant entity that cuts Zeke and his giant spirit of fire in half after proclaiming that this is what it feels like to be the Shaman King. And that's the anime. I feel like you could really tell that the whole ending here was more just a put together way to wrap things up. This definitely led to a lot of fans not being so fulfilled with where the anime took liberties here, and don't consider it the ending of the series, and technically it's not.
So like relax, I'm spilling these raps, long as you feel them till the day that I drop. You'll never say that I'm not.
Available now. Buy the Vault Edition and get access to exclusive content.
PlayStation.
You hungry, little guy?
The ending of Shaman King is one of confusion depending on where you jumped in or out at within the series. The manga ended at volume 32, but this wasn't the actual ending that was fully envisioned. The series would get reprinted as a complete edition, essentially, bringing the total number of volumes to 35, with this being the definitive version the direction of the series was fully meant to head in. The original anime reached a point that got about halfway through where the original manga was at before completely filling in the rest of the story to wrap up the series. But now there is a new version of the anime that gives Shaman King a second chance in animation form to tell the story a lot closer to the source material, and would total 52 episodes between 2021 and 2022. And it's also greenlit for a sequel series to continue on from there. So if you are a fan of Shaman King and you are watching the new version of the anime, there is still more to come. So whether you like how the new anime handled rebooting the series to be closer to the manga or not, it's just nice to see that Shaman King has gotten another resurgence for a chance to do so. Over the years since the original manga and anime ended, several spin-off manga had come out to build up Shaman King even further, like Shaman King Zero, Shaman King Flowers, Shaman King Red Crimson, Shaman King Superstar, Shaman King Marcos, Shaman King Into Garden, and Shaman King Faust 8, which all have varying amounts of volumes for their respective series. 4Kids used the licensing to try and make the brand bigger in the US. The early 2000s were crowded with every property trying to reach massive heights and labeled a franchise, and Shaman King was no different, so they turned to Konami to help make a series of video games with one main console release on the PS2 and 4 Game Boy Advance games, all within the span of a year. 2004 and 2005 became crowded with Shaman King games, and even 2 of them on the Game Boy Advance tried pulling a Pokemon with them, releasing on the same day, and with one version called Soaring Hawk and the other called Sprinting Wolf, where you collect spirits and fight with them. I more remember playing Master of Spirits 1 and 2, but regardless, they pumped them out and they did so extremely fast. Another thing that all these properties attempted was a card game, where here, Tomy was the one in charge of making the card game in Japan with Upper Deck's help in bringing it over to the US, which has for some reason led me to having this sealed booster box of cards. What am I supposed to do with this? The TCG didn't last long as Upper Deck blamed the lack of success with the anime with how the cards performed sales-wise. Regardless, Shaman King in recent times has found a new way to prevail with new printings and audio versions of the manga being released. The original anime getting the English and Japanese versions put out on Blu-ray thanks to Discotech, and most notable, a brand new version of the anime in general. Shaman King for me was best enjoyed growing up with the manga, getting the story the creator wanted to tell fully realized that way, before it would then be fully realized in the new complete versions. But in regards to the anime that we did get, I still enjoyed a good bit of it for what it was. Yeah, the dub is what it is, but it was how I was brought up on it animation-wise. But I will say, when I was in Japan, I did pick up this Blu-ray set of the new series, and I'm excited to see how it adapts the manga in a more direct way with all of the source material for the story out there before it was created. Revisiting the original anime, I can see all the reasons why it only fueled my enjoyment of the Shaman King property, but there truly is a lot that holds it back from being great, because it's definitely not for the concepts. I think the ideas and focusing on the shaman was just a really cool concept for a series in general. But to me, what held it back is partly thanks to the 4Kids dubbing, and partly thanks to where the show takes us in the end compared to the source material. The series ends up feeling like a rushed mess as it heads towards the finale. A bad ending or an unsatisfying ending can sour the whole journey taken to get there, and sadly, the first anime suffers from an ending that feels like a cop-out moment that we shouldn't have reached yet, or in the matter, not go in this direction at all. It's hard for me to recommend the original show regardless if the new anime does a better job at capturing the story of Shaman King or not, but if you grew up on these licensed anime dropping on the Fox box, then there is some fun to be found upon a revisit. There's also plenty of charm locked away in these 64 episodes that bring you right back to those Saturday mornings, and a feeling like that is always worth the stroll down memory lane. But it's not to say that it was for the show being a masterpiece, it's far from it, and ends on a less than stellar representation of where the story actually ends up going in other places. I would love to know if and how you were first introduced to Shaman King. Was it the manga, the video games, or the anime, or wade later down the line with some other stuff that came out for the Shaman King property? And also tell me your thoughts on the original anime in general if you ever checked it out. I've been Jordan Fringe. Thanks so much for watching. Like and subscribe. Later.
Break out of the everyday by indulging in something a little less routine.
When it comes to Mega Man, I've always had a weird relationship with it. For the original run of Mega Man games, I was never truly a fan of the gameplay. I don't think they're bad at all, just really not for me. Pretty much the same for the X series too. But when the 2000s came around and a new relaunch of the franchise, or at least a massive offshoot, was heading this way, I really found myself enjoying what it had to offer. From a brand new game series called Battle Network that would have more Pokemon-esque elements to it, to a manga that brought a lot of fun to these characters, to an anime that really solidified a click between me and the Mega Man franchise unlike anything before. This new vision for Mega Man was a complete overhaul. While the original Mega Man would stick around throughout the years since this, there was just such a specific moment in time from the early 2000s up until about 2010 that this new version of Mega Man was everything. Capcom really wanted something more than just a video game. They wanted what Pokemon had, what other franchises like that specifically had, which was everything. Tackling every bit of entertainment, not just the gaming or animation side, but toys and merch being a major factor that plays into it all. Today, as someone who was swept into the Mega Man madness at the time, I wanted to relive my experiences with you all through this era. From the Mega Man NT Warrior anime, the manga, and even the Battle Network video games, with a bunch of extras in between.
Who are you? I'm Mega Man. Nice to meet you.
It certainly was an era to behold. The start of the 2000s really sparked so much competition, or more so Burger Kinging a McDonald's in terms of seeing what Pokemon is doing and trying to follow it as much as possible, but just being a tad different. Not as far as let me copy your homework, I'll just change a few answers necessarily. It really relied on how much effort the company behind the property was willing to put in. Enter in Capcom, a company that has had some major ups and some major downs throughout its company's history. But now it was time to really shake things up in the new millennium. Sitting on a bunch of IPs, they looked at this one specifically and said, yeah, we can do something with this. Mega Man was a massive game franchise, very much known for its action platforming gameplay and endless amount of sequels, or soccer. But nothing would prepare Mega Man fans for what was next. It was time for Mega Man to get a mega makeover, and I personally think it's pretty sleek. There's just something so 21st century about it, and I was in. On every single front, pretty much. The game would change, there would be external add-ons to explore, and for my animation-loving self, an anime that fits right in next to the quote-unquote competitors it wanted to be around. Mega Man NT Warrior, or Rockman.exe in Japan, would be part of this major refresh, with Mega Man having had an anime adaptation beforehand in the 90s that tried tying itself to what the video games were back then, so the new one did so as well, our main protagonist being Lan, voiced by Brad Swale and Alex the Duck. Yes, his name is Lan, and the story is about digital avatars in the internet. And of course, Mega Man, or Megaman.exe, voiced by Andrew Francis, would both be the main protagonists of the Battle Network games as well. Since it is the digital age, we quickly get into what the heck is happening. Lan, in the human world, along with his friends, have these digital devices called PETs that let them be connected or jack into the internet through various ports, giving their digital avatars, or better known as NetNavis, access to the World Wide Web, and they battle their NetNavis against each other, where through their PETs they can pop in some battle chips that give their Navis some extra power power-ups to enhance the battle, finding a way right off the bat to be like, hey, we're kinda like that other thing you like, so give us a try. And I don't blame them or anyone for that matter for attempting to find a way for this to work within their properties, especially at this time. This also gives us that duality of real-world issues and digital ones. We meet Mega Man after Lan mopes around from not having a special or powerful NetNavi, like all of his friends and rivals seem to have. Well, that is until his father, who isn't around, sends him a chip that turns out to be his new NetNavi, Mega Man himself, ready and eager to be Lan's Navi. And we get right into the action from there as we learn about the grander world of the widening web. His oven in the kitchen catches fire, but won't stay out when he tries to extinguish it, as we find out that it's a computer or digital virus inside the appliance causing a problem, and so apparently Lan can jack into anything, sending Mega Man in to fight off these viruses, which are just these extremely adorable little guys. I love them, as in the background a great threat looms. A big concern of the rising in popularity internet and how accessible it was for anyone was viruses, among many other things, but man, we literally used LimeWire. We infected the heck out of our PCs just to crank that Soldier Boy. It was one of the times of all time. So having a story focusing around the internet with those who use it for fun and interconnectivity through exploration and battles, and those who seek to use it in evil ways, like the main big bad of the series being Dr. Wily, voiced by Paul Dobson, who formed World 3, or WWW. I see what they did there. Him and his underlings have bad intentions planned, of course, and our main protagonist will have to end up stopping it. Luckily, Lan and Mega Man aren't the only ones we focus on in the show. We meet plenty of others who are both good, bad, rivalish, and random to join in on the fighting back or just getting in the way. From Meilu, voiced by Brittany Wilson, and her Navi role voiced by Lenore Zan, to Chud, voiced by Bill Switzer, and his classic companion NetNavi of Proto Man, voiced by David Kay. There are plenty of characters to go over that really build this show into a really cool premise and immersive story that coming back to has been nothing but a warm returning feeling. This would also be great at giving some shine to the video games specifically. Hey, you like these characters in the show? Why wouldn't you like them in the video game? A series of video games for that matter, that tell a grander story thanks to the sheer volume of them, offering a lot of really fun and unique gameplay. Let's take a peek into the world of the video games, as a whole new Mega Man vibe was a full assault on every medium.
You're watching an all-new Mega Man NT Warrior on Kids WB. Mad Monkey Summer continues with Mega Man NT Warrior.
During this great reset of the Mega Man world, it heavily affected the gaming side of things, which only makes sense, of course, but here completely changing the Mega Man formula into a real-time tactical role-playing series. Now, comparatively to the original games, this was a massive change, and for many out there, this series wasn't their cup of tea. For me, however, I absolutely loved it. To me, the gameplay for the series clicked a lot more so than the original games. For this new series, it was following the formula of Pokemon, having Capcom shift focus heavily to the Game Boy Advance, with the first game coming out in March of 2001 in Japan and the American release hitting shelves on Halloween of that same year. First thing you see is, hey, why is Mega Man in the background of the box art? Who is this kid with the not Naruto headband? But if you'd eventually watch the show, you can just find that out. One of the main focuses of this generation of Mega Man media was the collectibles phase of everything else on the rise, especially card game-based properties, regardless if this series focused more or less on a card game, which I will speak on later in this video. But they had another collectible asset, something that will materialize into merchandise eventually. But for the games, instead of collectible cards or traditional monster taming aspects, you would collect battle chips that have some function similar to both. Keiji Inafune really wanted to nail down a new relatable setting, giving us a real world versus the digital world setting where the human user would jack in to the net every time yelling jack in, as we enter into Megaman.exe as a vessel vessel or NetNavi into the net world. Yeah, maybe jack in wasn't as hip as it was trying to sound, and when looking back at it, yeah, plug-in probably would have been a better option. It could have worked better, but you know, who am I to say? It was trying to really bring in that 2000s internet attitude that really defined us. If you weren't there, then you can never truly understand. Ooh, not me gatekeeping an aesthetic. Most iconically in the game was the 3x6 battle grid gameplay when battling as Mega Man, taking down your enemies. I always found just the visual of this so neat and pretty straightforward because of making it bold, colorful, and simple. These computer viruses you faced off against are pretty cool in design as well. You move around and try and land your attacks to reduce their life points down to 0, so then they will be defeated. Through the connected PET device that the human LAN has, you can insert battle chip upgrades that can aid you in battle, from special abilities to upgrades or restoring health or just directly affecting the viruses. When developing this game and what it could be, even before the decision to head into the collectible RPG world, Capcom came up with this being some sort of horror game, and maybe that's why this ketchup hallway death gag was a thing. But wanting to literally have the kind of fun you get from a Pokemon game, game director Masahiro Yasuma saw this as a great time to really refresh the series in an effort to reach more of a new audience and a way into the expansion of the property into all the other mediums. Because of that, something cool they added to the game in development was a connectivity feature that allowed you to connect with another person via a link cable and battle for fun, or battle for some real stakes where you can put chips on the line, or you can just, you know, trade them. While this new style of game ended up with some positive reviews for the most part, there was a major disconnect with some of the older fans of the franchise who either weren't into the overall new look and story of Mega Man, and or not into the gameplay style being completely different. Since then, with the original style of Mega Man making more of a comeback beyond this, we can really just look at this as a spin-off series that just took up all of Mega Man's time until his older style eventually returned. After the first game came out, the sequel would come out in that same year of 2001 in Japan, as the US would receive the sequel in June of the following year. The main difference here is that the second game has some new features and concepts that change up the base formula, which for the most part was the same. It looks the same, it essentially plays the same, just a few new things. It wouldn't be until the next game that things would really change, as now it would be time to really go after the Pokemon market, having two versions of what is basically the same game release, with a blue version featuring Mega Man on the cover and a white version also featuring Mega Man on the cover. Yeah, it's just Mega Man twice, but there are some NetNavis specific to each version, but really this is nothing more than a cover vanity. The games themselves though do really get an upgrade here. Some graphical upgrades, changing of how power-ups work and can be used, as well as a good virus breeding system, and then chip labeling that mainly relates back to the whole blue or white thing. And we can all just admit that it was only to duplicate the multiple version strategy, just with less differences. It doesn't mean the games are bad. The Japanese release was in December of 2002, with the US release dropping in June of 2003. The dual version releases though wouldn't stop there, with the next games being Red Sun and Blue Moon, probably before the beer. I don't know, I don't drink beer, but with each having Mega Man on the cover again. Were there any differences more than just version exclusive navis? Why yes, there were, just with different chips and souls, so really just pretty much small differences once again. But the games would continue to evolve and offer new gameplay mechanics, as well as a multiple playthrough story and an emotion window that determines the mood or current state of Mega Man, specifically because of all the new features that affect the battling and the strategies. Coming out in the tail end of December in 2003 for Japan, with a June 2004 release for the US. Mega Man Battle Network 5 would eventually come out with two versions in Japan, first with a December release for one version at the end of 2004, and a February release for the other one in 2005, both for the Game Boy Advance still, with the US release of Team Colonel and Team Proto Man in June of 2005. At this point, with yearly releases though, the fatigue set in, and the constant small changes and different versions gimmick was starting to get old with critics and some fans as well, which made us all for sure want to buy a third version of the game, the first one to be released on the Nintendo DS, Mega Man 5 Battle Network Double Team DS. That was a mouthful. This released a few months later in 2005 2005, with the US getting it in November, where it would feature some small upgrades from the Game Boy versions of the game with some additional content as well. And while that's really cool, at this point with the series, where do you even take it? You'd probably want to evolve it and keep it going on the Nintendo DS from here, and use the power of that system to help grow the franchise. But on a basic level, sure, you can just keep coming up with new stories and tweaks here and there. But if we look at the landscape of where this new version of Mega Man is it starting to hit a stale point on every single front that it's at? Well, maybe not quite. One final entry into the Mega Man Battle Network series would hit in Japan by November of 2005 and in the US by June of 2006. But this time back on the Game Boy rather than going forward onto the Nintendo DS, which I felt caught a lot of people off guard and a lot of people to just totally miss the release of it in general. Again, releasing with two versions, Psybeast Gregor and Psybeast Falzar. And the final big difference is right there in the title of the games. These Psybeasts are being reawakened by the bad guys, and you have to stop them. It was the finale to the main line of the spin-off series, with the main problem being the lack of innovation finally biting themselves in the foot. I think I just mixed up two sayings into one, but I'm leaving it in. There you go. Aside from the story, it was just hard to see the series not only stay stagnant, but regress in some ways. So while this game series would fade away from this point, the rest of this new take on Mega Man would as well. But now, all these years later, a full re-release and upgraded versions of every Battle Network game is coming out called Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection. And I cannot wait to dive back fully into each title to at least have them on current enough consoles to make them more accessible and easier to get to than ever. It will be released in the US on April 14th, 2023. Oh, weird. That's today as this video goes up. It's funny how that happens. Anyway, let's touch back on the show for now.
Mega May, all this month on Kids WB.
And repairs are complete.
Wow. A view like this makes you realize we're all in it together. And they left us. How much oxygen do we have? A lot, a little, ballpark?
Action, adventure, romance.
Corn wedding!
Mega Man NT Warrior has Surf's Up Saturday now continues on Kids WB.
Digging in deeper, the anime was something I found extremely entertaining. It was the perfect amount of fun internet action and corny dialogue. While this was still a Capcom property enhancer of sorts, the show had a lot of heart behind it, with the full-on intensity to make something that doesn't disappoint fans, but builds something unique that really gets into a friendship that transcends both the electronic and real world. Something that would be full of emotion and can be a bridge directly to the games. It was all in favor of gaining new fans for the franchise while trying not to alienate the legacy fans, not wanting to betray them or have them feeling that way. So just picture it. The anime is coming to the States. This mega stuffed Saturday morning on Kids WB was coming up on May 17th, 2003, and a preview of the show was played, sandwiched between Jackie Chan Adventures and Pokemon Master Quest. So yeah, people were surely watching. To also promote the upcoming anime, they had a sweepstakes that had a bunch of prizes like Game Boy Advances and all of the currently released Mega Man Battle Network games, with over 200 prizes dispersed out. On June 23rd, 2003, the show would officially premiere on Kids WB, and it was exactly what it needed to be. A perfect Saturday morning cartoon that brought you along on these grand adventures with a group of friends and rivals mixed in with a devious and evil plot. Lan himself is a headstrong character with a bit of hopefulness and charisma thrown in for good measure, as his relationship with Mega Man evolves throughout the show to just be the classic perfect protagonists, with Mega Man specifically being the goody two-shoes fighter for justice character that is able to adapt well to changes when it comes to powers and abilities. With a big heart and bigger blaster, there's a reason why the show is called Mega Man and not Mega Lan. Yeah, you know what? I'm sorry for that one. Meilu is pretty important to the show as well. She's as sweet as she is feisty, dishing out her care for Lan, but prone to explode into a rage if necessary. She's a great friend and is built to be something more than that, possibly as the series would go on. She's overall pretty likable, and I think Roll is a really cool character, offering a fun vibe and a perfect duo in comparison to Lan and Mega Man. All of the characters we meet along the way are really cool for the most part and add a lot to the overall experience, as we do meet quite the amount of people with both small and large roles, both inside and outside of the digital world. There's Dex, and he's the definition of, hey, where's my hug energy? especially over Meilu, and him and Lan are seen as rivals. He is voiced by Tony Sampson, with his trusty NetNavi being Gutsman, voiced by Scott McNeil. There's also Yai Amano, voiced by Jocelyn Lowen, with her NetNavi being Glide, voiced by Ted Cole. She's rich and manipulative, and what more do you expect when you see this little demon here? We support it. Just in general, the characters are all really fun to see interact with each other, and then bringing on the elements of their Navis all being so cool and unique that I just loved the time spent both in and out of the internet here. The animation in the show looks great, and the action scenes were all engaging, always finding a fun way to play with the visuals to represent the connections between the humans and the Navis. The show wasn't afraid to get a bit complex at times with its story and characters, offering a nice balance of fun and some lighter moments, but more gravitas in more serious moments. It felt nicely directed, allowing for some really solid pacing, not one time feeling like something was going on for too long. I feel something that did hurt the show was how Kids WB would play episodes out of order, making it harder to keep up with the storyline progressing, and it was just weirder that it was a show that initially was performing so well for them, but for just as quick as it came, it felt like it was starting to disappear, with this slow bleed out of episodes to eventually have the rest left dropped so randomly. And that strategy didn't bode too well for the rest of the series. Viz Media did what they could while producing the series, with the animation not being their only avenue with it, but I'll get to that in a second. It became clear that we weren't going to get a clean run of the show, not seeing everything in its full entirety, which is a shame. The show was for sure a lot bigger in Japan, having more to continue with the story, and even a movie that was tied into a double feature with Duel Masters. While I wish that continued here and the series ran for longer than it did, I still think for what we did get was pretty special and enough of a reason to sell you on checking out the other aspects of Mega Man this era aside from just the show. It did have censorship issues, but anything at this time especially was going through that, and it never was anything that really ruined the experience. It's just weird that with the success it supposedly had, why were there so many episodes that played out of order? Why did the support of bringing the show over stop? Because lack of interest? Possibly. It was a time of too much of a good thing. Rather than focus on doing the best parts of things great, stuff like the quality of the game started to suffer in terms of improving them. It became quantity over quality. The show just kind of became this expendable thing in the mix there, at least for the US is concerned, and all of the merchandise associated with the property would follow suit over the following years and make a disappearance. Was it time to cut their losses, or was it time to try something new with Mega Man again? Because it also wasn't the last anime the US would see for Mega Man, as we would then get Mega Man Star Force, which would take place 200 years in the future from the NT Warrior series. And while maintaining a somewhat similar look to the previous show, it definitely was a lot different. But as far as the show, those are my thoughts on it, and I feel that time going by has just made the show a whole lot more fun thanks to my nostalgia for this era, having extremely fond memories of it all. But there are still some other moving parts to this series before it would all come to an end and this era of Mega Man would be over. There's a few more things to take a look at.
Mega Man's Mega Villain Week, beginning Monday afternoon at 3:30.
The attraction towards new experiences is
Mega Man NT Warrior, coming in May.
Something I haven't touched on yet would be the manga series. I myself still have my original several volumes here, but never finished collecting the series as the series would officially end at volume 13. But I absolutely loved them for what I had. No clue why I never got the rest of the series, but I'm just so weirdly nostalgic for the artwork in this manga. I probably will go on and finish collecting the rest of the series here at some point, but beyond that, the other super big part of the market for this new Mega Man series was the merchandise, specifically all of the toys that came out. First of all, we all somehow had this, right? I can't recall ever asking for this for my birthday or a holiday, or even when or how I actually received it, but I feel like everyone I knew had one of these, and I still have mine. This Mega Man Mega Buster Cannon that has 2 modes with blaster and sword features. It's honestly pretty sick. There were an abundance of action figures, from these really cool smaller sized ones but having such cool poses, then some mid-sized ones, and even deluxe ones, and everyone had this Mega Man action figure, I swear. But also as memorable was this, the Advanced PET, which could be used with all of those battle chips that have NetNavies in them where you can battle them against computer viruses and more. Mattel would bring products like this as much as they could outside of Japan, but in general, the majority of merchandise stayed in Japan. One other aspect that was brought to the United States thanks to Decipher was the Mega Man NT Warrior trading card game, which surprisingly, I never really looked into as a kid, especially with how much I liked every other aspect of this new Mega Man, but hey, what can you do? Now, while not being exactly the same as the Japanese version of this card game, the cards look like your standard anime card game. The booster boxes look cool, but it never really was a massive hit. It had a total of 3 sets, and it ended in 2005. Mega Man NT Warrior as a show was a really fun way to enjoy the property. Kids WB have stated just how well the show was performing for them, that it beat out all of these other competitors within its demographic, which again kind of confuses me. But thanks to the other fronts of this new Mega Man seemingly coming to an end, from the games to the manga, the show suffered a similar fate, despite how much viewership it apparently had. Honestly, Capcom really came swinging hard with a bunch of avenues ready to go. It may already seem like a lot just from the anime, to the merch, to the manga, to the games, but even in saying that, we only covered on a base level the main 6 games in the Battle Network series, not even touching on the other games that came out in this era as well that tied into everything. First, they also wanted to take things from the handheld to the console, with a Japanese release in March of 2003 and a US release in June of 2003, Mega Man Network Transmission dropped on the GameCube, trying to be this bridge between the original style of Mega Man games and this new style of them, having a lot of the core original elements of action and platforming, yet still having a role-playing and strategy aspect that makes the new games very fun. While I really love the look and feel of this game personally, it didn't fare as well on the review side of things from the critics. It definitely was a bit clunky in terms of some of the game mechanics, and some of the enemies would be taking some cheap shots at you, but it was pretty ambitious and a smart move to try and develop something that sits in between both of the gameplay styles. Now heading back to the Game Boy Advance, there was a spin-off of the spin-off called Mega Man Battle Chip Challenge. It dropped in Japan on both the Game Boy Advance and WonderSwan Color in August of 2003, and hit the US in March of 2004. And what would set it apart from the Battle Network games is that if the Battle Network games could be seen like the mainline Pokemon games, then Battle Chip Challenge can be seen as the Pokemon trading card game. This turns the battle chip aspect directly into a card game deck building concept as you enter into a tournament. There was a lot of Mega Man in a little amount of time, and this isn't even considering the stuff that I didn't see at the time, like the Japanese only video games for the series under the Rockman.exe branding, or whatever aspects of the anime never made their way over here. If anything, this was all a bold decision from Capcom, essentially reinventing the character and molding them into something familiar enough, but in almost every aspect completely new. I feel this iteration really helped me get into Mega Man, and it's the version I connect with the most. I had a lot of fun playing the games growing up, and I'm going to have a lot of fun with them now thanks to this re-release coming out. I very much enjoyed the manga growing up, and I plan on finishing it, purchasing the rest of the volumes I don't have, and of course, the anime I think is fantastic. It's just extremely charming, and it has all the makings of what the franchises similar to it have, and it captured my interest greatly. While after this re-release, I highly expect to not hear anything coming from the Battle Network era for quite some time, or ever again for that matter, it was still a lot of fun to look back on it all and relive every bit of it as an adult. And I still have this blaster. What do I even do with this thing? Let me know your thoughts on everything from this era of Mega Man in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. Like and subscribe. Later.
Seconds, please.
I just do what I do.
Cracker Barrel. Now this is cheese.
Adventure Time is a fantasy-fueled animated Cartoon Network series that follows Finn and Jake as they adventure around, kicking butt and saving lives. The series is not only a modern-day classic and held in very high regard by many, but it also managed to impressively capture the hearts of a diverse audience of all ages with its clever humor and poignant creativity. Through its monumental 10-season run, the series managed to transcend the television screen of young kids and formed a whole generation of artists and viewers alike in books, games, and online culture. If you enjoy the video, you better subscribe. Stick with me as we go on the quest of a lifetime exploring the conception, themes, and world building of Adventure Time, as well as discover why it was such a revolutionary cultural phenomenon in its time, with a lasting impact that is still felt to this day.
You guys are up to something!
Welcome back to the 25 Days of Fringemas, where there's going to be brand new videos every single day from December 1st to December 25th. Hop aboard. The series is essentially just two guys being dudes. Just two guys being dudes in a fantasy world, that is. Starring Finn the human and his best friend and bro for life, Jake the dog. The two must navigate a strange, warped world in the near future after the fallout of the Great Mushroom War. Magic has returned to the land, and Finn, commonly referred to as Finn the human, is voiced by Jeremy Shada, and is characterized as the ideal heroic protagonist. He's characterized as a fiery kid who has a strong desire to help people by doing the right thing. His iconic look consists of his two-eared white hat, blue outfit, and green backpack, and of course his flowing blonde locks that we get to experience on rare occasions. He also isn't complete without a sword in his hand. While like I said, he's a righteous hero, he's also just a boy. His character shows off a broad range of traits. He can be short-tempered and impulsive. He also craves a sense of security and normalcy within a twisted-up mutant world. And no character is unmarred throughout the course of the 10 seasons of adventuring. His character is knocked down and wronged in so many ways, but he doesn't let it change his character. He just lets things grow with him as he matures. Jake is Finn's older adoptive brother, who is also the other main character in the series. Voiced by John DiMaggio, Jake sounds and acts a bit more mature than Finn, but I use the word mature very lightly, as he really is just a goofball sometimes. He hits a broad range of character traits, sometimes proving to be incredibly wise and protective to nonsensical and sometimes self-centered. He's basically the stereotypical chaotic older mentor figure that is prone to crime on some occasions. You know, the typical stuff, right? But he also cares for Finn an incredible amount and proves to be unconditionally loyal to him. Oh yeah, and he has the magical ability to shapeshift into anything. I can't believe I didn't mention that first, but now I am. Jake's magical abilities come in handy on a multitude of occasions. Both Jake and Finn have made heroing their occupations, so they actively go out and seek adventures in the majority of these episodes. Jake's shapeshifting becomes a really nice safety net considering how Finn, especially in the start of the series, can be pretty fragile. The two of them live in their tree fort, which is basically just the coolest tree house that you could ever imagine. When they adventure away from home, they usually spend their time with other characters like Princess Bubblegum, the Ice King, Marceline the Vampire Queen, Lumpy Space Princess, Tree Trunks, Earl of Lemongrab, Beemo, and a whole world of other unique magical characters.
What the what? This ain't nothing but a little movement therapy. Why me as my shoulders moving voluntarily? I step left, but his hip go right. When he get it, I get it, nigga hit no side.
Created by Pendleton Ward, Adventure Time started out as a hit online animated short and over the course of a decade has developed into a Cartoon Network cult classic that everyone recognizes. The origin of the series can be traced all the way back to Ward's years at university at Cal Arts, specifically at a final film screening called the Cal Arts Producers Show. In the audience, enjoying the final products of the graduating animation students, was Eric Human, producer for Frederator Studios. He decided to approach Ward after the show for a few reasons, the main one being he just truly enjoyed his work. He said that every time he saw one of his works, he never wanted it to end. So he invited Penn Ward to pitch some cartoon ideas for Frederator for their shorts anthology series titled Random Cartoons. These would later air on Nickelodeon and be an incredible way to seek out fresh new ideas for potential series. Ward showed up to the pitch with his guitar, and instead of presenting a storyboard or just talking through his idea, he sang what we now recognize as the Adventure Time intro song. And traditionally, bringing a musical instrument to a professional series pitch usually would be a red flag for the studio, but the pitch went well and everyone enjoyed his ideas. It took a bit of convincing for Fred of Frederator to commit to Ward's artsy idea, but when he did, Ward entered production full swing, doing a lot of the heavy lifting himself, in terms of animation and voice acting. But he completed the 7-minute short on April 24th, 2006. A few months later, it was nominated for an Annie Award, but they had a bit of a problem when it came to screening the short. It hadn't, and due to the production guidelines, couldn't air online yet, but it needed to be accessible to the Annie voters, so they pulled a sneak 100 and aired it under the radar on Nick's sister outlet, Nicktoons, in the early morning hours of January 2007. Shortly after, Frederator posted the short to Google Video and later held a screening for all of the shorts in the Random Cartoons program. Seemingly overnight, it gained tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands of views. It was an instant online success, developing a very dedicated cult fan base over the course of just a few days. Despite the extremely tangible representation of its success in view counts and reviews, Nick decided to pass on Adventure Time for some reason, something I know they'll regret after seeing its empire grow in the years that followed. But even though Nick turned it down, Frederator and Ward shook it off and took their idea elsewhere, specifically to where Ward had been working at the time on the Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack, Cartoon Network. Fred Seibert approached Rob Scorcher, the chief content officer, with the idea. Scorcher at the time felt the series was something that was unique and indie, something that felt comic booky, with a completely new tone. Although it did feel unpolished, they picked up the series, and at the time, it was technically a big risk because the idea was not fully realized. But in pulling his trust in Frederator and this unique story, he took on one of their most successful shows ever. In creating series, there were a lot of influences for Ward, some more traditional ones being Dungeons & Dragons, video games like A Boy and His Blob, and Michael Jackson's Moonwalker arcade game. But in creating the art style, Ward is incredibly vocal about how influential his peers and coworkers were, trying to infuse his art with a lot of little traits here and there from a lot of his coworkers on previous shows. Additionally, in making important decisions like the voice actors, Ward turned to his mother's preferences when choosing what he wanted his show to sound like. His mother, who was not a fan of cartoons and specifically was tired of listening to cartoon voices most characters had, Ward wanted his characters to have a natural tone to them, and not have characters that are just plain annoying just to have an annoying character. He wanted every one of his characters to have a solid range of emotions, exhibiting a more real feel to their personalities. Artistically, when designing the consistent look of the series for his characters, Ward turned to his own tastes and preferences. He says he just likes cute looking stuff, so simple and minimal features were most appealing. The concept of not having noses or anything else on their face to detract from expression was also important. He wanted to reference the classic smiley face's iconic representation of emotion in its simplest form. Another plus side to this is that kids could very easily draw these characters too, which was additionally important to Ward. The flexibility of simple design made it so that not only could viewers and kids simply draw the characters, but even the storyboard artists on the series would have a much easier time with artistic consistency in the series. The first official episode of Adventure Time premiered on Cartoon Network on April 5th, 2010, and faced astounding immediate success ratings-wise. The short pilot on Nicktoons was a fantastic preface and predictor to how the series would be received once realized. From there, the series ran for a staggering 283 episodes in 10 seasons, with one bonus episode special, series of shorts, and an additional miniseries on top of that. It also boasts an impressive number of impact to the gaming world, with several video games, online Cartoon Network games, and so many other types of games released as well. Even a few crossovers or parodies were attempted in stuff like Futurama, The Simpsons, and for some reason Deadpool. He owns a watch with both Finn and Jake on it. I guess that speaks to how diverse their audience is, but if you really think about it, Deadpool would love this show. The reason for its success could pretty simply be attributed to the times. The rapidly growing structure of online fandom was undeniable, especially during the time that Adventure Time had originally premiered its short. Once it captured the attention of those online, it spread like wildfire and drove people of all ages to watch it on Cartoon Network. The humor of the time too was also incredibly important. The style of humor was random XD. I'm having graphic flashbacks just thinking about it. But Adventure Time manages to capture that sense of humor in an indirect way and really took the reins. The incredibly bizarre setting gave the artist and crew infinite resources for expressing various themes. They had so much artistic freedom in terms of style and plot devices to really do anything that they wanted, and also offered continuing plots for Finn and Jake to drag the viewer along with them. The team really experimented, and due to its shorter format, they got to try out new tones and explore new places without too much on the line. They would constantly have guest animators come on and make make these really surreal looking episodes with new art styles, and honestly, they're some of the coolest episodes of the entire series, getting to really do whatever they wanted. While the series is funny and random XD to a decent extent, it also gives the viewer space to breathe and experience different ranges of emotions. From the beginning of his formative years, Ward loved video games where he could stop on one screen and just sit looking at the art, taking everything in, noticing new details as he would do that. He notices that when you're watching cartoons, not a lot of shows give you the gift of slowing down. The series also allows deeper themes to be explored, like the complexities of parent-child relationships, the difficulty of change, and even the darker side of a post-apocalyptic world, like the subsequent loneliness, depression, and existentialism that comes with it. It also does a great job of making long-lasting character development, which is essential for a series that had such a long and meaningful run.
And now for one more thing.
You hungry, little guy? Oh. Hi there, little buddy. You hungry, little guy? You want a little more?
And that's how I adopted John.
Okay, now have you ever been with a player? Don't need a spatula.
No, please, no. Ow, it's so hot. Ow, it's really hurting. Ow, ow, ow.
You deserve to be seen with somebody as fine.
Say when. Never, John. Bury me in cheese. Oh. I apologize in advance. The eating you're about to see will not be pretty. And if you have young children, this would be a good time for them to leave the room.
You ain't never seen nobody this
Hey, Junior, this is Vic, my father.
You ever jumped a train?
I've never jumped.
Here's that stop.
Really? Where?
Oh, Odie, you'd think he'd see that coming.
Let's get it. I deserve to be with somebody as fine as me.
Wait for it.
Ow, it's really hurting.
To be seen with somebody as fine as me. Somebody this fine.
Color me intrigued.
But I think another really big reason why this show just holds up so well for so many people and created the legacy that it has is because of the world itself, the lore that it built up. While the show can give you moments that are very peaceful and nonchalant, whole episodes that are really just nothing but fun, there's this other side to it that isn't just random XD. While some people may find it overblown and over the top, or overall just a lot to take in, throughout the 10 seasons there is just so much history history that we go through, how much we learn about the very distant past, all the way now to the future, and everything in between, with the catalyst of everything being the Mushroom War, how all the events that led up to that happening, how it affected people afterwards, where the world is afterwards. This cute, silly little show about a boy and a dog going on all of these adventures, at the surface level, just seems like an enjoyable little show. But if you got invested, if you got hooked into this show, there is so much rich, beautiful lore here that it's hard not to get sucked in. It's hard not to care about these characters, all the weird things that happen. You might meet characters with the most ridiculous names, have the most ridiculous designs, but somehow, even in its weirdest moments, it just fits for the show. Having great characters and very cool visuals is something that is always going to get someone's attention. But to give your audience something that is tangible, something to ponder over, something to study and take something away from, give them opportunities to form theories and ideas, come to their own conclusions about certain things. This is what builds something that is undeniably a cultural phenomenon. Although it did have some inconsistencies with airing and sometimes was prone to the bomb treatment, it still managed to reach a huge audience that was incredibly vocal about their love for the show. And the impact didn't stop there. Artists from the series were inspired by their time working on the show and went off to create further iconic and well-known shows that have garnered their own success in their own right. The series would also just keep bringing it home at every awards ceremony, as you can imagine, being nominated for one, or sometimes more than one, Primetime Emmy every year for 10 years, and winning half of those nominations. It knocked it out of the park in both audience and critic impressions. So if the series was so freaking popular, why did it end? Well, everything's gotta end sometimes, right? I don't know what to tell you, man. If you're still angry about it ending after 10 seasons, ask yourself, will you ever be satisfied? Jokes aside, the original series really just ran its course, but of course, as HBO showed with its miniseries Distant Lands, everyone is still very much interested in seeing more of Finn, Jake, and their whole wide world of friends. It's only been a year since the miniseries ended, so it's very understandable to be hopeful and asking, what's next for our adventuring duo? And lucky you, there's an answer. HBO and Cartoon Network will be exclusively releasing a special series on the HBO Max streaming service, which will be titled Adventure Time Fiona and Cake. Retaining a lot of the same crew, the series will focus on the adventures of the Finn and Jake gender benders Fiona and Cake. In one of the season 3 episodes sharing the same title, we got to explore an Ice King fanfiction that takes place in an alternate world where every character's gender is swapped. Based on that idea, the series will deal with hot topics like the multiverse and will feature new villains. The series, as of right now, is set to premiere sometime next year in 2023, and I'm incredibly excited to see what it has to offer. The success of Adventure Time, though, cannot be understated. Outside of the show, the biggest thing that would propel Adventure Time to literally being this cultural movement was the merch associated with it. All different types of people were fans of the show. It didn't stay tied to one demographic or another, and I single-handedly blame Adventure Time for turning Hot Topic from this, well, to this. It had appeal to such a large fan base, completely taking over the 2010s market, and helped pave the way for the rise of more shows in this manner throughout the previous decade that seemingly took over Cartoon Network. Whether you enjoyed a bunch of the shows that came from this or not is besides the point. What Adventure Time achieved has become a legacy to Cartoon Network, a movement that helped shift into the more modern style of cartoons on Cartoon Network. It continued on to carry the torch from earlier shows from the end of the 2000s, from stuff like Chowder and Flapjack, and made a massive splash in the animation space. It inspired people, it built new careers beyond it, and most of all, it made Nickelodeon question their decision to pass on the show. What are your thoughts on Adventure Time? Were you there living through the rise of it and partaking in the fandom? Were you late to the party but still jumped into it when you did? Or were you never really into Adventure Time at all? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. Like and subscribe. Later.
She sailors, it's snack time with Yogo. Yogo, snack it up.
This is an account of my personal journey in watching Steven Universe, a show that I unfortunately slept on for so long but have constantly heard nothing but amazing things about. I finally sat down and took a look at the series, and before I knew it, I was hooked. The rich characters, the deep lore, and the experience of what it means to be a person. It all feels so real and personal that I couldn't help but fall in love with a lot of what this show has to offer. Steven Universe is a Cartoon Network animated series created by Rebecca Sugar. It follows the coming of age of a young boy named Steven as he discovers secrets of the universe and himself. Voiced by Zach Callison, Steven Universe lives in a beach house attached to an ancient temple structure with 3 gems who serve as his parental figures: Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl. Gems are an ageless alien species that take the humanoid form of their actual life form, their gem. They have different magical abilities such as seeing into the future, flying, jumping really high, healing, shape-shifting, summoning weapons at will, and regeneration, as long as their gems aren't affected. The overarching plot lies with family drama with the most powerful gems in the universe, the diamonds. It's musical, it's charming, it's flawed, it's fun. Steven Universe covers a lot of ground in the 180 episodes, 2 series, and 1 TV movie. So today, I wanted to talk about the show, my views and takeaways from the series, as well as what it was all about, and why I think it's a beautiful show. If you enjoyed the video, may I interest you in the subscribe button? But for today, let's take a look at Steven Universe.
Guess I'm making us breakfast.
Welcome back to the 20.
Oh, I think I'm done for today. This is a little bit of coloring. I think in the next stream I'm going to finish up, add more details. But yeah, if you like what you see, feel free to follow me on all social media platforms. I'm Giovanni Hall Art, and you can follow on Instagram, Tumblr, Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, YouTube, and Patreon at Giovanni Hall Art. Same username. You guys have a good one. Bye.